President Trump shows no signs of backing off his trade war with China after negotiators failed to strike a deal. On Friday, he more than doubled tariffs on some 5,000 categories of Chinese products, including furniture, electronics, and other consumer goods. And the president is threatening to impose tariffs on essentially all remaining imports from China. That's another $300 billion of products. Joining us now for an exclusive interview to discuss what happens next, President Trump's top White House economic advisor, Larry Kudlow. Larry, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. Happy Mother's Day.
Thank you. Well, I'm not sure that you need to be saying Happy Mother's Day to each other, but I will take it. I want to start with something that you said a couple of weeks ago when you were pretty optimistic about a trade deal with China. Here you are.
I think we're on about the 7-yard line. Okay, maybe even the 5-yard line, looking into the end zone.
What yard line are we on now, and what set us back?
Well, we may still be on the 5 or the 7, but as I said in that clip, those are the toughest yards to get. So, look, the situation for us, from our standpoint, we were moving well. Constructive talks, and I still think that's the case. We're going to continue the talks, as the president suggested in his tweet on Friday. But the problem is, 2 weeks ago in China, there was backtracking by the Chinese, and we covered the same ground with Liu He this past week, Ambassador Lighthizer and Secretary Mnuchin. You can't forget this. This is a huge deal, the broadest scope and scale anything the two countries have ever had before. But we have to get through a lot of issues. For many years, China trade was unfair, non-reciprocal, unbalanced, in many cases unlawful. And so we have to correct those. And one of the sticking points right now is we would like to see these corrections in an agreement which is codified by law in China, not just a State Council announcement. We need to see something much clearer. And until we do, we have to keep our tariffs on. That's part of the enforcement process as far as we're concerned. And as the president has said, things that seem to be taking too long, and we can't accept any backtracking. We are representing the United States, the economy, farmers, auto workers, manufacturers. These are crucial parts to this discussion. So we want to be as sure as we can be. We don't think the Chinese have come far enough. We'll wait and see. The talks will continue, and I will say this is a G20 meeting in Japan toward the end of June next month. The chances that President Trump and President Xi will get together at that meeting are probably pretty good.
So you pointed out the president's tweet on Friday where he seemed pretty conciliatory. And in fact, the stock market, which had dropped dramatically on Friday with news that the talks, the negotiations had ended without any deal, rose on the kind of conciliatory, optimistic tone from the president and from Treasury Secretary Mnuchin. The president was much more combative in a tweet yesterday, late yesterday. I want to put this up on the screen. I think that China felt that they were being beaten so badly in the recent negotiations that they may as well wait around for the next election, 2020, to see if they could get lucky and have a Democrat win. The deal will become far worse for them if it has to be negotiated in my second term. That's a lot tougher than the president was talking on Friday. How come?
Well, look, that's his view. We think sometimes China may be misinterpreting U.S. politics. I don't want to go deep into that, but I think there's always an issue there. Here's the fundamental things. We've said this many times. Intellectual property theft has to be fixed. Forced technology transfer and ownership of American companies has to be fixed. Cyber interventions have to be fixed. Tariff and non-tariff barriers have to be fixed. And there have to be very, very strong enforcement provisions. Okay. Some of the Chinese officials have said, both in Beijing and here with the Mr. Liu He, that the agreement was too unbalanced, okay, and had to be. No, the relationship has been too unbalanced, and because of these problems of unfair and sometimes unlawful trading practices, we have to have a very strong agreement to right these wrongs before we will be satisfied.
All right, I want to go through a quick checklist, and I want you quick answers here, like a lightning round on where we stand right now. Do you expect China to retaliate for our increase in tariffs, and how soon?
I think I do, But it's interesting, the expected countermeasures have not yet materialized. We may know more today or even this evening or tomorrow. Yeah, I reckon they will. We'll see what they come up with. So far, we haven't heard on that basis.
Are new talks, at this point, there was talk, well, talks will continue. Are new talks scheduled with China?
Not yet. But the Chinese have invited Ambassador Lighthizer to come over to Beijing, Press Secretary Mnuchin also. No concrete, definite plans yet. I do expect that. And by the by, let me repeat, the strong possibility that the two presidents will meet in Japan at the G20 meeting.
How long before President Trump makes good on his threat to impose 25% tariffs on all the rest of Chinese imports into this country, basically that final $300 billion in Chinese goods?
Well, we've already launched that process up on the USTR website. What happens in this, if I get this right, we will have announcements, we will have hearings, we will have public comments. How long does it take? I don't know. It could be a couple of months, thereabouts.
Couple of months, because there have been talk 3 or 4 weeks. You're saying it could take longer.
Yeah, I mean, among other things, there has to be, as I understand it, a 60-day public comment period, something like that. So, you know, call it a couple months, call it 3 months. I don't know. Ambassador Lighthizer can detail that, but that will take some time. And then, of course, the president's going to have to make the final decision on that.
Let's talk about who pays for the higher tariffs on Chinese imports. Here's what President Trump had to say this week.
Our country can take in $120 billion a year in tariffs, paid for mostly by China, by the way, not by us. A lot of people try and steer it in a different direction. It's really ultimately it's paid for largely by China.
But Larry, that isn't true. It's not China that pays tariffs. It's the American importers, the American companies that pay what in effect is a tax increase and oftentimes passes it on to U.S. consumers.
Fair enough. In fact, both sides will pay. Both sides will pay in these things. And, of course, it depends.
If it's a tariff on goods coming into the country, the Chinese aren't paying.
No, but the Chinese will suffer GDP losses and so forth with respect to a diminishing export market and goods that they may need for their own
I understand that, but the president says China doesn't. China, it pays the tariffs. They may suffer consequences, but it's U.S. businesses and U.S. consumers who pay, correct?
Yes, to some extent. I don't disagree with that. Again, both sides will suffer on this. Look,
well, I want to pick up on both sides, because let's look at one study that projects what the costs are of all U.S. tariffs. Look at the screen. This study found that all current tariffs cost an average family of four $767 a year and cut U.S. employment by more than 900,000 jobs. And the study found if the president were to impose that 25% tariff extended on all Chinese imports, including the $300 billion, plus the cost of Chinese retaliation, it'll cost an American family of four $2,200 a year, cut American employment by over 2 million jobs, and cut GDP growth by more than 1%.
Our work on this, CEA and NEC, think those are pretty wildly exaggerated numbers. I would suggest that if you go the whole boat, 200 billion increase from 10 to 25, plus the other 300 billion, we reckon it would be about 0.2% of GDP, so it's a very modest number. We have a $20 trillion GDP. In terms of possible job losses, we're way, way below that number. And I want to note here, the United States economy is in a boom. The numbers are coming in terrific, better than anybody expected on growth, on jobs, on unemployment, on wages, on productivity. We're in terrific shape. In order to correct 20 years plus of unfair trading practices with China, as I said, unlawful trading practices, I think this is a risk we should and can take without damaging our economy in any appreciable way. I will note, as others have, maybe this is part of your lightning round bullets, maybe the toughest burdens on the farmers, the agriculture sector. We get that. We've helped them before on lost exports. I think we had an authorization of $12 billion. We will do it again if we have to be, and if the numbers show that out.
That's my next question. Yeah. Are you reading upside down?
Well, I'm very good at it. I've had some experience. But you know, we will do that. But again, in a rising economy, we're in a terrific prosperity cycle. because of our policies of lower taxes and deregulation, and I might add trade reforms, we will be in very good shape. And by the way, something else the president has said, let me add this on. The tariffs themselves are producing a big increase in customs duties, big increase, perhaps something of a magnitude this past 12 months of maybe $25 billion. That will help finance farmers, and that will help ease the transition. You got to do what you got to do. We have had unfair trading practices all these years, and so, in my judgment, the economic consequences are so small, but the possible improvement in trade and exports and open markets for the United States, this is worthwhile doing.
Okay, the last thing I want to talk about, and I'm in no way questioning the wisdom of deciding to take on, there's no question that has been an unequal, unfair relationship in trade between the U.S. and China. Last thing I want to get to is the question of how determined President Trump is to see this through, because he clearly had an expectation. If he got tough with China on tariffs, that basically they were going to cave and that there was going to be a deal and everything was going to be great, and he, as opposed to every other president, was going to reset the relationship. That is no longer so clear. And I guess my question is, how long is President Trump prepared to wage this trade war with China, which clearly has costs to the American economy and consumers and businesses?
Well, I don't know. I mean, can I substitute trade negotiation for trade war? I mean, after all, we're talking. We will talk some more.
I understand, but we have tariffs on them. They have tariffs on us. We're threatening to vastly increase.
It's part of
It's not a negotiation. We're taking action.
It is a negotiation, and part of the negotiation is taking action. I mean,
okay, but answer my question, which is how far.
One of the things I've learned, in fairness, one of the things I've learned under President Trump is that tariffs are part of negotiations, and they show that we do mean business, and we will take action. Chris, again, we have been on the wrong side.
How long is he prepared to continue this effort and keep these tariffs on?
I wouldn't want to put a timetable on it. I would just say, as he has tweeted and has said to us and said to the Chinese, we're continuing our discussions. That's a very good thing. Negotiations, you know, over time, stop, go, stop, go. The speed may be fast or the speed may be slow. This is not at all unusual.
Are you suggesting, though, that there might be a certain point where he goes, this just isn't worth the economic cost and political cost, and pulls back?
I don't want to second guess that. I don't want to put timetables. That's completely up to the president.
But you're not ruling it out.
I think the economic costs are de minimis. The potential economic gains of a good deal that opens up China and makes them legal trading partners, those gains are huge. So that's a cost-benefit analysis that I really like. Politically, I think the country is completely behind the president and his tough approach to China. And in fact, as you know, leading Democrats such as Senator Schumer and others have supported the president in this battle. So I think sometimes you can do the right thing. And in a sense, this is a bipartisan policy, and it's long overdue. So let me repeat my point.
We don't have time for you to repeat.
It's worth doing. We have to change the trading relationship between the two countries for the benefit of the United States and its workforce and its ranchers and farmers and so forth. We have to do this. President's spot on.
Larry, thank you. Okay. Thanks for your time. I must say, I hope you enjoy our conversations as much as I do, because I find it a delight.
That's why I'm here. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And we will be tracking the next steps in negotiations with China. Thank you for coming in.
Appreciate it.